Yes, yes, yes. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the beginning. It really, really is. If you didn't know already, we have got some brand new, very interesting information about the plot of The Batman Part 2 as teased by Matt Reeves to SFX magazine. So we're gonna dive into all of the details of this, and when I say dive into it, this is gonna be quite a deep dive, because even though he gave us a brief tease about the plot and how Batman's on the new case and what that case pertains to, we, go down a certain direction through the lens of a certain rogues gallery villain. By the way, I know there's a bunch of DCU news going on as well. I'm gonna reserve that for tomorrow's video. I'm gonna try and get a video out tomorrow, but this one's entirely dedicated to the Batman Part 2, but we will be getting into that. Don't worry, just bear with me, because I think this video deserves its own speculation time and deep dive. So first up, Matt Reeves says to SFX magazine here that the plan is to shoot next year, and we're finishing up the script now. He goes on to say that Colin Farrell will be a part of the movie. We've shared the script as we've been going along with DC and the studio, and they're super excited. Next up, he goes on to say, our entry point is absolutely connected to where we leave things in the series, as in the Penguin series. There are details that actually connect right into the way the next movie begins, and the way that Oz enters that world as we hand the baton back to Batman, and Batman is on another case. So that's just great to hear, because, we got the Penguin series, we know it ties directly into the Batman Part 2, right even at the beginning of the movie, and naturally the baton gets handed back to Batman in the Batman Part 2, because the Part 2 movie isn't called the Penguin Part 2 or whatever, is it? So that is when we're going to go back to Batman's perspective of things, and he's already on another case, of which this whole bloody video is about. And this is where we really sink our teeth into the details of Part 2. So Matt Reeves continues to say, I would like these stories to be a meditation on the way Gotham is the way it is. It's such a brutal place, and we're digging for the answers as to why these people's lives are this way. So, as for Part 2, it's another mystery that's going to dig into the epic story about deeper corruption, and it goes into places that he, as in Batman, couldn't even anticipate in the first one. The seeds of where this goes are all in the first movie. Super interesting. And it expands in a way that will show you aspects of the character you never got to see. Batman is constantly battling these forces, but those forces can't be entirely exercised. So the next movie delves deeper into that. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is where the fun begins. And by the way, we're going to get into exactly what these seeds possibly could be. And I know some of you may be like, oh, but did he really say too much? Yes, he really did, by the way. He really did in what he said there. He may not have said the Rogues Gallery villain, but we can most certainly go down the rabbit hole here. Because when he says that the baton gets handed back to Batman and that he's on another case already, well, what is this case? But I just love hearing that it's going to dig into the epic story about deeper corruption, and it goes into places that he couldn't even anticipate in the first one, and how there's seeds in the first movie that link into the second movie's big bad plot. So this is huge, because with the line of how it says to the point of it goes into places that Batman couldn't even anticipate in the first one, this is leading many people to think, after these interview details came out, that it could be none other than the Court of Owls. And I've got so many notes here, so do bear with me as I look at my screen. Now, one thing I want to say right out the gate here is that there is something in me that doesn't want to jump to that conclusion. But the thing is, I'm genuinely not sure what deeper corruption there could be after what was exposed in the first movie, to the point of what he couldn't even anticipate in the first film being other than the court, if you know what I mean. So for the sake of, like, I guess everyone's popularity of this speculation in this video, we're going to lean into the speculation through that lens, through the lens of hypothetically entertaining it being the Court of Owls, but we will go to other places as well, but that will be the primary camera lens, if you will, that we focus on here in this discussion. But the reason why I say all of this, just to really hammer it in, but please, obviously, if you disagree with me or have any other ideas, let me know down in the comments. But think about it, right? In the first film, we had the corruption of all of the institutions of Gotham exposed. The literal powers that make up Gotham, which, if corrupt, most certainly, naturally, control the city. And that was the district attorney, the mayor, the commissioner, you name it. Like, that is corruption everywhere, controlling the city. So therefore, with Matt Reeves saying what he did, what could possibly be the layers beneath that corruption? Well, in all reality, in the source material, those who run things behind that, and arguably what the Riddler exposed in the first movie was like as corrupt as it could kind of get, unless underneath those layers, it really would be the Court of Owls in the source material. Now, again, I do want to stress, it might not be the Court of Owls, so we shouldn't absolutely say that it definitively is the Court of Owls, because I've seen some people, as a result of this interview and these details with SFX magazine, just act like it is confirmed on various Instagram and Twitter posts. But I have to admit, though, it's really hard for me to figure out what else it could be, given how Matt Reeves teased what is in store for part 2. So we're going to go down this rabbit hole, and all I can say is strap yourselves in. And one little side note, I know people like traditionally view the Court of Owls perfect for a Batman who's way more experienced, because it shows that there was more to Gotham than he ever knew during his watch of already doing it for years and years and years and years, versus Robert Pattinson's Batman who's only a couple of years in. But I do think that same sentiment, as I always say, adaptations don't copy and paste. I do think that same sentiment can literally still be put onto a younger Batman. Again, innovation, it can still work. And before anyone says it, as for Talons being adapted and being more fantastical in the comics, kind of, being undead among other qualities to them, well, in this iteration, that can still easily be done, just in a purely grounded assassin version still called Talons. Simple as that. So first things first, and I'm still going in this as a bit of a skeptic. What I'm asking right away when everyone's saying Court of Owls is that, how does Batman even get onto this new case? He's on another case, as Matt Reeves says. If we hypothetically assume for the sake of argument in this video that it is the court. Because, I've written down here, the corruption was all the institutions, as we've gone over already, the mayor, the district attorney, the commissioner, it's all explained. The Riddler exposed it, it's via Falcone, the betrayal that he did in ratting out Maroni's drug trade 20 years ago from the setting of the Batman movie, and then Falcone got all of the officials at the time and the powers that be with everyone back then in on it, and so Falcone had them all in his pocket, and he ruled literally the whole city for the next 20 years, with all of the pillars and officials of Gotham completely under his control. That's why it was such a big corruption story in the first movie. And so, that's all, for all intents and purposes, that's all figured out, isn't it? So, like, how does one, Batman, get onto a new and even deeper trail of corruption? That is the question. But let's now get into the comment about the seeds, and where Reeves literally says the seeds of where this goes, so in part 2, are all in the first movie. And it expands in a way that will show you aspects of the character you never got to see. So if you apply this to the Court of Owls, some people are thinking there were seeds of the Court of Owls in the first movie. I've been hearing this for years now. So number 1, Gil Colson. Everyone was talking about the lines that he said right before his head got blown off, and he said, if I go this way, it's just me, but I give you that name, I got family, people I care about, they'll kill them too. And Batman's like, what are you talking about? And Gil Colson says, people are watching. What people? Who? Listen to me, goddammit. You may think you know what this is, but you don't. It's so much bigger than you could ever imagine. It's the whole system. And so people, as I've said, since all the way back then, have speculated that he may have been on about the Court of Owls, and I've been over this several times myself over the past couple of years, and back then I put it down to like... I don't know, guys. I don't know, because within the context of the movie, that one line where he's like, it's the whole system, does make sense within the context of the plot of the film and how it pertained to the corruption that eventually got exposed. And that was literally the whole system of all the powers that be in Gotham, like the mayor of the city, the district attorney who prosecutes cases or who got paid to not prosecute certain cases, the police commission, like it goes on and on and on. Like that's the whole system. So I get how people read into those lines, but it did feel like a bit of rose-tinted glass, like fan goggles. And my analogy for that is when you have fan goggles on, it's all in, you know, the best interests of wanting to see something, but it might not really reflect the reality of what could happen. So it felt fangoggly to me in terms of speculation, because again, his lines literally are most likely about how he was terrified because Falcone literally had the whole system in his pocket. They're listening. He literally had a bomb disposal like camera there, so he could have been referring to that. There could be certain police officers who would rat him out to Falcone, and if he does that, his family could get killed, that kind of thing. And so does this teaser from Reeves that could imply the Court of Owls change my mind about Gil Colson's lines now? I still don't know about that one, because I think the next question I jump to is, would Colson really be in the know about the Court of Owls, even if you want to entertain this theory? So let me put it this way. I struggle to believe that if someone like Gil Colson, a DA, was aware of the court, how would Riddler himself, who exposed all of this stuff, not have really found out an inkling about the court in some way, shape, or form? And, Colson, in reality, in my opinion, would only really be aware of what was set up 20 years ago with Falcone. So I see, 0% reason as to why Colson would be in the know / ranked up to the upper echelons of the knowledge of a much deeper inner circle to the point of the Court of Owls. It's just that doesn't add up to me at all. Like, they would just view him as a bit of a puppet, wouldn't they? Like Falcone. Like, he's a DA who got paid $10K to not prosecute certain cases, and all he needs to know, and this is, the Court of Owls is a need-to-know situation, so all Gil Colson, the district attorney of Gotham, needs to know is that it comes from the top, as in Falcone and the mob, of whom he takes these orders from. And thus, in his terror, in that scene about his family being in danger, people watching, pertains to how, again, anyone could be watching or listening because it's the whole system. So was Colson one of the seeds that Matt Reeves is saying here that links into Part 2's deeper corruption that goes into places Batman couldn't even anticipate in the first one? I really don't think so, but let me know if you disagree. But let's now move on to seed number 2. And that is what Carmine Falcone said right before he died. So this again isn't new speculation. Fans have been wondering about these lines about the court for quite a while. So right as Batman is arresting Falcone, he says, "Jesus, look at you. What do you think this is? You think you're gonna scare me with that mask and the cape? I'm gonna start crying and some big secret's coming out. Let me tell you something. Whatever I know, whatever I've done, it's all going with me, okay? To my grave." So this is yet again another example of something at the time and since really I kind of dismissed in a similar way to Gil Colson, mainly because, well, within the context of the film's plot, Falcone, the guy who literally had everyone in his pocket for the last 20 years, possibly even murdered the Waynes, even though that's something I need to stress we can't be sure about. More on that in a little bit. It fits that he's just saying that as he's getting arrested, that he won't spill any of the secrets of the stuff that he's done, of, which God knows how much, he could spill and confess to. But sure, I'm gonna play ball a little bit here. If anyone would have more of a link to the Court of Owls than someone like bloody Gil Colson, who I just can't get my head around being in the knowledge of the court. If you just really follow it logically there, with the points I made. But Falcone, yeah, as the guy who ruled the city, could there be somebody behind him that he was in communications with? Quite Possibly. That's one I will absolutely entertain, even if I think these lines still fit into the context of the plot of the film and what, Falcone got exposed for at the time, and just him not wanting to confess to anything. You could still extend these lines to mean something else, to something larger, something deeper in the second film. So, yeah, Gil Colson is out the window for me, but Falcone, if there is a shadow organization behind the man who's already controlling things in the shadows, as in all the officials, he genuinely might answer to somebody larger. Next up, as for the other seeds, well, I do want to also add in that not every single seed has to pertain to the further corruption in the second film. So another seed that we could entertain here, and that everyone is aware of by now and has been popular speculation, is that of Hush, Tommy Elliot. You can have more than one thing going on in the Batman Part 2. Just like how in the Batman Part 1, you had the main villain being Edward Nashton, the Riddler. But you also had Falcone there. You also had the Penguin doing his thing. You also had this other thing going on, right? Albeit, they're all kind of still organically linked into the larger plot of corruption in the story. So you can have a similar thing going on in part 2. So let's just say, for argument's sake, you have the Court of Owls thing going on, but the seed planted of Hush could be expanded as a secondary plot that somehow links into all of this as well, and on top of, Oz being Kingpin and everything like that. So if you're hazy on the details, Edward Elliot, who we can easily assume to be Thomas Elliot's father in Matt Reeves' iteration, was a reporter who was writing up a piece on the Waynes, exposing the murder and self-delete, if you will, of Martha's mother, or should I say Martha's parents, and Thomas Wayne wanted to protect his wife. So he tried to initially pay hush money to Edward Elliot in order for him to not pursue that story and publish it so the whole of Gotham would know. But he refused, outright refused, so Thomas Wayne then went to Falcone, of whom he already had some form of relationship with because he saved his life at one point in time in where Falcone was shot. So this is where Thomas Wayne went to Falcone to intimidate, not kill, but intimidate Edward Elliot, kind of put the fear of God into Edward Elliot, because Thomas obviously viewed himself as not really the kind of man to be able to do that, but hey, Carmine Falcone might be able to do this. But since Falcone wanted Thomas in his pocket, just like the rest of the city, he had Edward Elliot murdered. And as a result, Thomas Wayne was distraught, was going to the police, and that very night he died. But the point is here that Edward Elliot could have had a son, and who knows what happened to that son, of whom we can assume to be Thomas Elliot. He could have adopted the name Hush after the hush money payment thing was played by the Riddler to the whole of Gotham, by the way. This is something I want everyone to be aware of. That expose by the Riddler was played on the news. So even if Edward Elliot didn't know much about it before, he would have seen, hey, that's my dad. Oh, Hush money. I'm going to adopt the name Hush. I know that sounds so lame, put it simply there, but that's just one fleeting idea of how he could adopt that title of a Rogues Gallery villain. Now, this is where things get a bit more out there, because you might be like, okay, so that I get how they could do the Court of Owls and maybe a secondary thing with Oz as Kingpin, and maybe a secondary thing of a seed that was in part 1 with Edward Elliot's son, Hush, but how would he organically link into the larger corruption thing going on? So this is where there are some more out there theories that I'm reading, of which could be counted as another seed, and this does link to Hush as well. So bear with me, and one big thing that was in the first movie was orphans and orphanages. So if this, and only if this is the Court of Owls and they do Talons, I've seen some people speculate out there that perhaps some of the orphans in the first movie were picked up by the court and made into Talon assassins in this grounded universe, and how this could even link back to the reporter Edward Elliot's son, of whom we can assume to be, again, Tommy Elliot Hush. I mean, we know that the orphanage burnt down. Where did all those orphans go? I'm not saying nobody would have noticed. just like all these orphans just got plucked up into thin air, but like you get where I'm going with this. They could easily pad this out with logical explanations, but really the Court of Owls, you know, takes a bunch of these orphans, maybe Edward Elliot being one of them, and you know, things go from there on out. And the idea that people are like entertaining here is that perhaps they could blend Hush's character into a bit of a Lincoln Marsh kind of thing, and you know who he is if you've read The Court of Owls. And I know people would be like, but that's not Hush. You know, but they've already done innovation. Again, adaptations don't copy and paste of the source material with the whole Riddler and Hush thing. So you could argue, hey, if we're going to try and do our own thing here, the Court of Owls, we still have assassin Talons, but let's bring in a seed from part 1 and where Edward Elliot's son was actually, you know, taken in by the court to be more of a Lincoln Marsh kind of figure from the Court of Owls New 52 storyline. He comes into present day as a public persona. That for me, this is getting a bit out there to the point of kind of spitballing ideas, but I do see what people are getting at when they toss those ideas out there, because it would very creepily pertain to what Matt Reeves was saying and how part 2's plot goes deeper into corruption, and it goes into places that Batman just, you know, couldn't even anticipate in the first movie. So if he's already eventually anticipated in the first movie, oh my god, this corruption's gone so much bigger than I could have imagined, all of these officials that control the city are corrupt, like, it goes beyond that. What couldn't he even anticipate? This could maybe creepily be one of those things. Some weird story linking back to Orphans would be something that Bruce, I think, couldn't even anticipate in the first one. But then again, I just want to say, might not be this at all. If they do Hush, it might have nothing to do with Talons. Even if the Court are in the second movie, the Hush thing could be a bit of a separate thing that is more the, you know, you might have a personal story that Batman is tackling in the second movie with the Court, and then on the Bruce Wayne side, which we naturally assume is going to be brought out more, this might be more of his antagonist for the public persona Bruce Wayne's side with Hush. Do you know what I mean? You can have like multiple antagonists for like the both sides of Bruce Wayne and Batman. So there's that to bear in mind as well. Like these kind of wacky out there ideas about orphans maybe being Talons, it is getting into a bit of fan fiction territory for me. I just wanted to put it out there, but also don't dismiss the idea of Matt Reeves doing Court of Owls as well as Kingpin Oz, as well as Edward Elliot's son coming back as a bit of a separate subplot to Bruce's own kind of public persona thing that he needs to tackle. I don't know though, but maybe they could interweave them in a way that we can't even foresee right now, and ways that I'm not even mentioning in this video. Next up, another seed, and that is the Wayne's death itself. So in the first movie, this is just to entertain it, it was more of a point the finger situation. You know, Falcone was said to Bruce, it wasn't me. I'm implying that it was Maroni, you know? But then Alfred really painted the situation a lot more clearer and said that it, you know, definitely wasn't Maroni. But the events that unfolded with what I mentioned earlier, Thomas went to Carmine in order to scare Edward Elliot. Edward Elliot got killed. Thomas felt distraught. That was never a part of the plan. He only wanted to intimidate him so he wouldn't put that report out there about Martha and her parents. And that night he went to the police. So Alfred said, okay, you know, I'm paraphrasing here, but the meaning is that makes it look like, okay, well, to avoid Thomas Wayne going to the police, Falcone would have him killed. But Alfred still admitted, like, we can't be sure of that. But at the same time, I do want to say we shouldn't assume too much, because that may very well be the intent. Like, the Wayne's death not truly being solved, not knowing for sure if it was still, you know, Maroni or Carmine Falcone, could be a deliberate and ambiguous thing done in the story, because that is an interesting thing of itself. Like, Bruce Wayne never truly knows who killed his parents. Could have been Maroni? Well, probably, most definitely isn't. Could have been Falcone, but what if it really wasn't, and it was just a random thug in the streets like Joe Chill? But even if you want to believe that they've done that intentionally, so it's like, oh, you know, we've got clues, but we'll never know who it is, and that's kind of like a fascinating thing, they could extend this in part 2 in terms of, okay, if it wasn't Maroni, if it wasn't Joe Chill, if it wasn't Falcone, what if the court had them killed for one reason or another? Maybe, but this speculation leads down a billion different rabbit holes. Why did the Court of Owls kill Thomas and Martha Wayne? Would this imply that Thomas and Martha Wayne were aware of the court and had even shadier dealings? Because that was already a controversial thing in the first movie, which I think did get cleared up. It didn't make Thomas Wayne look super sketchy. He didn't get Edward Elliot killed. He still turned out to be kind of a good guy. Don't get me wrong, you still probably shouldn't go to a crime boss to intimidate someone, but he still wasn't like the scum of the earth. So the Waynes, for all intents and purposes, were still good people, but if they're linked to the court, to the point of the court wanting to kill them, that would maybe bring up the controversy again amongst the audience, being like, oh, they're making the Waynes, super corrupt. And, the reason why I'm entertaining this is because Matt Reeves says that it's going to dig deeper into that deeper corruption and goes into places that Batman couldn't even anticipate in the first one. Well, I guess, you wouldn't anticipate your parents being a part of a shadow organization, and then that's why they ended up getting killed, like behind the corruption of Falcone controlling the entire city. That's insane. But I don't know about this one. I really don't know. They could reawaken that whole story with the Wayne's death being an unsure thing and give more context about it. But I would love to know what you think, because it's really just a seed that, because no matter what, Matt Reeves says there's seeds in the first movie that are linking to whatever this big, deeper corruption behind the corruption of the first movie was. And to my knowledge, out of the seeds that I've said, there really isn't too many more. Maybe I'm being ignorant to it, but to be honest, there's the Edward Elliot thing / hush money payment. There's the Wayne's death. There's the Gil Colson thing that I basically dismiss. And then there's the secrets thing that Carmine Falcone said that he would take to his grave. So roughly around 4 seeds. I guess there is a 5th seed if you want to include the orphans, the orphanage, among other orphanages that could be out there. And, again, might not link to the way that I explained it earlier. It could be a whole separate thing. So 5 potential seeds, and there really isn't anything else. Like, do correct me if I'm wrong, but like those, in my opinion, are the potential seeds that could be going into part 2. Like, there isn't really any other ambiguity surrounding the first film's plot that could be seen as a seed, I think. So I think that's everything I've got to say for now about the whole idea of what Matt Reeves teased in part 2. He doesn't spell out the name of a particular Rogues Gallery character, but as I've already gone over enough, it does give us enough to play with in terms of making a video of this length. There are other details in this article, but I will go over those in my news roundup video tomorrow. And as for the Court of Owls, guys, I know lots of people think, yeah, you know what, that should be a DCU Batman one, and I do think possibly it could fit in really well there as well. But for now, if there is a Court of Owls plot that is unfolding in part 2, I do absolutely believe Matt Reeves could do it justice there in a grounded way. It does fit into the world of corruption that is in the Batman universe, the epic crime saga universe. The only thing is, I've been saying for a long time, is that even though this is an epic crime saga, I didn't necessarily want a repeat of like the core theme of what we had in the first movie. You may have heard me say that before in terms of how if the second movie does corruption, wouldn't it feel like a little bit similar? Now, yeah, sure, Gotham's always going to be corrupt despite what was exposed in the first movie. I never expected us to not get into further corruption in some way, shape, or form. But I've always said that the second movie, it would be cool if we saw like a different Rogues Gallery villain, one that was maybe a bit more physical or whatever. But if it is the Court of Owls, as per what, well, we know that it's about deeper corruption, and I don't think Mr. Freeze fits that. I don't think Clayface fits that. I don't think the Ventriloquist or Scarecrow fit that. So that's why, everyone's going on about the Court of Owls at the minute. How do I feel about that? I think it is an is what it is situation. I've always said, if Matt Reeves chooses something, I have absolute faith in him. And I'm not going to pretend as if like the Batman Part 2 being about the Court of Owls and unraveling that mystery in the second movie, like that wouldn't be cool. No, of course it would be. But of course, there is still a part of me that does feel like, oh, Riddler exposed all this corruption in the first movie. Sure, he's not going to be doing it in the second movie, but further corruption's still going to be exposed. But again, it's still going to be cool. So, I just hope that by part 3, if we get a part 3, if part 2 is successful in the box office, that it would be another Rogues Gallery villain. Let me know what you think of what Matt Reeves said. Let me know if you believe that this could be about Court of Owls. Let me know if you have another candidate. I know this was a long-ass rambly video, basically borderline a discussion series video. It feels so good talking about it, getting some more grains of truth about part 2. And this is just the beginning. like, when we start to see who could be cast for part 2, major trades teasing, oh, it could be this character in part 2, that's only going to give, like, absolutely, like, pouring gas over a fire of igniting this conversation to turn from a 40-minute video into a 2-hour video. So, yeah, can't wait to see what you have to say. Leave a like on this video if you did enjoy it. Do consider subscribing for any and all info like this. I promise you not every news update will be as long as this, but yeah, this will be the first place you hear the most deep dive info and speculation about what we're going to hear in the future. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Bat family in the next video. Goodbye.